Hey guys, what's happening? So, I'm not necessarily trying to throw the dirt on Chris Evans playing Captain America, but I was reading through some 2004 Captain America issues, and I'm seeing a lot of coincidences between the style of that writing and what we've already seen in Captain America Winter Soldier and Captain America Civil War. And it's like when you take those issues that run from 2004 to like 2011, I believe, and you sprinkle on top some of the comments that we get from Marvel and the Russo brothers, and you look at all of it and you see what you got, it kind of looked like a recipe for death. At least for Steve Rogers. But even still moving forward in the MCU, it would make for some real good storytelling. Because Chris Evans' contract is over after Avengers 4. I still believe he's gonna die in Infinity War, if not at the beginning of Avengers 4. And Avengers 4 is just gonna show him either in time travel or Tony Stark replaying the past, trying to see what he could have done better, something of that nature. And on top of that, Chris Evans is just ready to do new things as far as acting and directing. And trust me, this is not me just trying to get rid of the guy. I love Chris Evans as Captain America, and I would love to see him play the role for another 10 years. But he has other plans, and I respect that. But I believe in the MCU, we're eventually going to see Tony Stark give Bucky Barnes Cap's shield, and possibly even make him a suit like he did in the comics. And when this happens, they should pull from this same Captain America run that I believe they pulled from for Captain America Winter Soldier and Captain America Civil War. And there are a lot of uncanny similarities there, because the same building that I believe was like the center of disease control in the film, in the Civil War film, it looks almost exactly like the outside of the museum that Bucky Barnes visited in the comics when he was making plans to steal Captain America's shield after he was assassinated. And on the inside, the way they have it set up, it looks a lot like the museum in Captain America Winter Soldier. Like they got the plane, the motorcycle, and those couple of coincidences are just like the tip of the iceberg. Because when Bucky chases down the shield to take it in transport, he stops this vehicle nearly the same way that he stopped Nick Fury in Winter Soldier. With the only exception, instead of shooting the device under the car, he just did it manually with his own hand. And in the same volume, I want to say it's like the 5th volume, but in an earlier issue, earlier on, I believe it's issue number 14, we even got the iconic Bucky punching the shield shot. All of this happened in the MCU one way or the other, and it also happened in this 5th volume of Captain America. But instead of Nick Fury being the person who's transporting the shield, it actually turned out to be Black Widow. And the Russo brothers have already planted seeds in both of their previous Captain America Marvel films, establishing that these two already knew each other. And the first time was when Black Widow recognized the ballistics from Nick Fury getting shot, and the second time, I swear nobody knows what I'm talking about with the second time, but the second time was in Civil War, where she asked Bucky if he recognized her. Okay, so two things. One, that is Black Widow's signature move in the MCU. And ever since she showed up in Iron Man 2, she's been taking people down left and right with that move. But when she uses it on Bucky, he stops her halfway through and he takes her down. And immediately after this happens, she's like, okay, you gotta remember me. At least you could remember me. And the reason why he should remember her, or at least one of the reasons why, is because in the Red Room, he helped train her. And all that goes deeper into Department X, who turned Bucky Barnes into the Winter Soldier, because their main focus was creating super soldiers for the Soviets that would go into the KGB, but they also created the Red Room, which was a project or more or less a process that would continue to produce the perfect assassin. And that's how they initially met. And hopefully Marvel explores this in Phase 4 when we get our Black Widow film, because that would be the perfect opportunity to explore the history between Black Widow and Bucky Barnes, especially if they're planning to make him Captain America at some point in time, which I definitely believe they are. But if we were to get a Black Widow film that tells more about her origin, and I'm real picky about origin stories, but this one would be crazy. But if we get an origin story with Black Widow, one of the best spies / assassins in the world, who finally sits down and tells her story and tells all the secrets that fit with the MCU continuity, and the story she tells ties in with every little bit of truth that she's told, like the time when the Winter Soldier shot her, it could have been just a cover-up because he didn't want Department X to think that he remembered her. Because when they found out that he had developed a relationship with Black Widow, they pulled him from her training and put him back on ice. But moments like this would be great to put in the film, because not only would it add more development to Black Widow's character, but it would add way more dimension to Bucky Barnes, which would be much needed to make him the next Captain America. But as far as the turning point and what led Bucky to becoming the next Captain America, this also stemmed from this same series, and it happened right after a Civil War event, right after the assassination of Captain America. And right after Civil War, you got Tony Stark, of course, who became director of S.H.I.E.L.D., and he would remain the director all the way up till Secret Invasion. Side note, I like to see this too, but this leads more into my scroll theories, but I'll leave a link in the description for you guys to check that out. But when Tony became director of S.H.I.E.L.D., people were asking him left and right, like, who's gonna be the new Captain America? And how can the Avengers be the Avengers without Captain America? And he would more or less tell the press, like, no, that's not gonna happen. There was only one captain, nobody's gonna replace him, that's it. But when we jump over to Civil War Fallen Sun, we start to see a bit of a different narrative, because at one point he asked Hawkeye to don the mantle. And it wasn't just Hawkeye, because there are at least 77 other agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. that Tony interviewed for this position, but they all failed miserably. And this is mainly because Hawkeye and Bucky are two of the few people who can throw Captain America's shield and not be killed or hospitalized in the process. And with Hawkeye, it was more amazing because he doesn't have any superpowers, and he's not a super soldier. Bucky, on the other hand, has a metal arm and other enhancements. But Hawkeye was kind of torn between actually doing this. On one hand, he wanted to honor Captain America because what he meant to him personally. And for a very short while, he put on the costume, but that didn't last too long because eventually he went with his gut and he gave the shield back to Tony. But as far as Bucky, after the death of Captain America, he was after Tony Stark and the Red Skull, mainly because he blamed them for his death. On Tony's part, it's more so the whole dealing with Civil War, and as far as the Red Skull, he tied that together with the assassination. And from Bucky's perspective, that put the two of them on the top of his hit list. Which brings me to another point which I cannot not address, like I can't go without saying it. But when Bucky goes after Tony here, literally trying to kill Tony, furious about the death of Captain America, like this entire scene looks just like the end of Captain America Civil War, just that it's Bucky trying to kill Tony instead of vice versa. I swear the Russo brothers are the most consistent. They still switch it up, but they're like the most consistent when adapting the comics to the screen. But after fighting Tony and really coming to a stalemate to where Tony can liquefy his brain or Bucky can shoot him, at this point it comes to the place where Tony tells Bucky that this isn't what Cap would have wanted. And in the MCU, I doubt that we'll get this face-off between the two of them again, but I do believe that is the line that's gonna sell Bucky into actually becoming Captain America. That and Black Widow dropping her 2 cents, of course. But also right here, Tony gives Bucky a letter from Captain America. And of course, Tony read it before he gave it to him. And he said he read it about 100 times. But this letter that Bucky gets could also be something that we see in Phase 4. Because going into Infinity War, Cap really doesn't know if he has the time to tell Bucky that if anything happens to him, that he wants Bucky to find a way to do what he feels is right, to figure out what he's fighting for, hold on to that, and fight for that until the end. And the reason why I feel like this should be delivered in the form of a letter is one, because Cap's old-fashioned and that's how he does it. And two, is because we've seen this happen before in Captain America Civil War. And in that instance, Steve writes Tony this very vulnerable letter, letting him know that the Avengers are more so Tony's than his, but also leaving him a phone to contact him if he ever needs them. And because of this, if Steve Rogers were to leave a letter with Tony or somebody else, somebody he would trust, even T'Challa or Shuri. But for Steve to leave this letter, much like in the comics, because the letter didn't say, hey, become Captain America when I die, but it more so read to the intentions of Steve leaving a message to save Bucky from himself. And from there, it's Tony who proposes more the idea that Bucky becomes the new Captain America. Because much like the MCU, Tony personally feels like he really let Steve down. And during the time of Infinity War, there's going to be no time to really cover any of this. Which is another reason if Cap dies in Infinity War, Tony Stark's going to be one of the people who takes it the worst. Because he let Captain America down. And just like Wanda Maximoff said in Age of Ultron, when Tony feels like he's wrong, he'll do anything to make it right. And we've seen that play out a number of times. And in my opinion, for Tony, it is that same guilt that's going to drive him to a place where he says the world needs another Captain America, with the truth being he needs another Captain America. But the combination of the letter and the conversation with Tony and Widow, they convince Bucky. And in the comics, he said he'll do it under 2 conditions. One, they clean his mind out so there's no more trigger words in there and no one can control him again. And 2, he doesn't have to answer to Tony. In that reference, you can either tie to Age of Ultron, back when Maria Hill was going to Tony calling him boss, and he was like, nope, Cap's the boss, I just pay for everything and make everybody look cool. Or as far as the comics, I talk more about it in my Age of Heroes video, where I more specifically answer about Cap not having to answer to anybody. But as far as Bucky, those were his 2 requests. And so right after that, in the comics, much like in the MCU, they executed it differently, but the same thing. But soon after, Bucky went through a procedure and had all the trigger words and everything cleared out of his head, making sure that he couldn't fall under the whole mind control thing anymore. And this we already seen in the MCU prequel comics, with Shuri clearing out Bucky's mind after Steve took Bucky over to Wakanda. And there you are. That's your formula for making Bucky Barnes the next Captain America. And much like the comics, Tony would make the new suit, of course, but this would also bring back a lot of that emotion when Cap left the shield with Tony after Captain America Civil War. Once again giving Tony that motivation to right his wrongs with Bucky, much like with Steve, because eventually Tony's gonna come to the realization that it was Hydra that killed his parents, not Bucky. But that's it for this one, guys. Oh, and I think it's also pretty cool that the Russo brothers had an image of Bucky with Cap's shield for their profile picture on Twitter, but it was only for like a day or two. Then they took it down real quick. I just thought that was kind of interesting. But that's all I got for this one, guys. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, and we'll do it again on the next one. All right, later.